Hi everybody, Creative Katie, Karen Birdshill here. Welcome to my channel, Mixed Media Creations. Thank you to those of you that are subscribers. If you're not a subscriber, please hit the subscribe button now and select the option to get notified of upcoming videos. This video is part of my Build My Stash series. In this series, I will be showing you quick, easy, and inexpensive ways that you can create papers, embellishments, and other things that you can add to your mixed media art journal stash. If you have an idea, leave it in the comments below.
Hi everybody, and welcome to a brand new series, Build Your Stash. This series is going to be great for beginners and those of us who've been around for a while in the mixed media art journaling thing. And what this series is going to be about is just showing you ways, simple, quick, easy ways that you can build your stash, that you can build up your supplies so that you have a lot of embellishments or colored papers that you can then use in the creation of some beautiful canvases and pages. The idea for this came from while I was doing the index card a day challenge, and on and on again I kept pulling sentiments that I had printed out that were in my stash, and embellishments that I had created at another time that were in my stash, and colored papers that I had created. And someone had commented, I wish I had a stash. It'd be great to have a video where you show us how to build our stash. And so that's what I'm going to attempt to do. Now, these videos are not going to be necessarily very complex. It's just giving you an idea and hoping that you run with the idea. And today we are going to color and create collage papers or background papers out of coffee filters. So you can get, which is really inexpensive, so you have the regular size coffee filter, the 12 cup. Buy them at the dollar store, $1.25 in Canada at the dollar store today. So those are the usual ones. Now, if you can get your hands on some commercial ones, they are considerably bigger, which means that you will be able to, if you want to use it for a background or you want more of the collage papers, you'll be able to use. So this one, you could do an entire background of a 5x7. Whereas this one, you could probably do a 5x7, but you're going to have to piece the corners a little bit, which isn't a problem. But this will give you a little more opportunities. What I typically do is I grab 2 sheets of this size coffee filter, and I'll do both of them at the same time, so they're a similar pattern, design, colors. And then if I need to do it on a bigger spread or I need more of it, then I have it. So that's something that I've come into. There's also the cone coffee filter that is, this shape. It's a different material. It's a thicker material. Takes paint a little differently, collages a little bit differently. Love it as well. So it's definitely part. I just rip them apart, and I have all of these just off to the side while I'm creating. And when I have leftover paint, I grab and I put them onto these coffee filters. So I've kind of done the video, and then in the process of doing the video, I came to some realizations about what I prefer to do. Now, there is no rhyme and reason to this. You can do them in any order. What I'm going to use is mediums that are permanent. So any acrylic paint. I love the dilutions. They blend so well and they absorb on the coffee filters and make amazing things. So I've got my Dilutions paints here. They are great. You can use your, Americana craft paint or Martha Stewart or folk art or deco art, whatever, doesn't matter. Those work. They are permanent. As well, any of our Liquitex basics, permanent and stuff. Don't forget to grab out your golds and your silvers and your metallics, because that's going to add some lovely sheen to it. What I will not use is anything that's not permanent. I'm not going to use my Neocolor 2s. They are water soluble. I'm not going to use my Distress crayons. I'm not going to use my gelatos or my Lindy's sprays, because primarily they're going to reactivate and I'm not going to remember. If I was doing one, specifically for a project, I might use these products and then being very careful not to reactivate it. But these are things that are going into my stash. So I don't want to have to remember that, oh, that's a spray. You can always add the spray elements and some of these things afterwards when you're actually creating. Oh, one more thing that I'm going to use that is permanent, that I like how it works, are my Inktense blocks. And you can probably do the same thing with your pencils if that's what you have, but the blocks just make it that much easier.
So basically I start with the coffee filter and I spray it down and I wet it. I find that I like how the paint absorbs into it, and quite often it makes better use of the paint. It makes it spread out and dilutes it, and you get kind of that watercolory look. Now, when I'm putting colors on and it's all wet, I want to stick to colors that are next to each other on the color wheel. If the coffee filter is dry, you can put any color on top of it. So I'm just going to, this is pretty much what I do when I have leftover paint. And I do it wet, and I pretty much do the whole process all at one time. I put on the color, and I like using at least a couple different shades. I don't like it to be one tone, but sometimes you only have one color, and so that coffee filter sits there and I add to it later on. So there are no hard, fast rules. But I like how when it's wet, the blendability increases, but you need to stick to colors next to each other on the color wheel, or you will make mud. So see, this is still wet, and I'm going to apply paint through a stencil while it's wet. And quite often when I'm doing it in the midst of a project, that's what I do, because I don't take the time to dry it. But for the sake of building your stash, I think I almost prefer doing all the base coats and then going in and doing stenciling and stamping and doing everything. But it really doesn't matter. You can do it in any particular order. But I like, when you're building stuff in the stash, to kind of do things assembly line. If you put it on when it's wet, it will kind of wick out and bleed out and kind of give you that watercolory look. So it is a bit of a different look. So try it both ways and see which one you like best. I'm absolutely loving this background. And then I'm thinking, you know what? I'm going to splatter with gold paint. Now, if I was building my stash, I may not necessarily splatter with gold paint as a separate step, because quite often, almost every project I have gold paint, and inevitably I put too much paint out. So if these coffee filters were sitting there dry, I could grab them and splatter gold paint at a later time. Remember, you can always, always, always add more to it. And I'm just showing you, even when I splatter, you can see how it's kind of wicked out, and it's given a very different look. So these are the other kind of coffee filters, and I'm just showing here that you can do some stamping. Now, you can use archival ink, or you can use black acrylic paint. The black acrylic paint might add a little bit of texture, but here I'm just using my script stamp and my coastal escape stamp and some mark making tools just to put another layer of interest on there. And you can do this really quickly ahead of time. Here I'm using shelf liner. Love this shelf liner. And it's just adding another layer of interest onto what you're going to use for a focal point, for a background, or for some kind of embellishment. Another shelf liner, there's so many different patterns. They make perfect marks. You do not need expensive stamps to do this. You can do this with black as I'm doing it. You can do it with colored ones, a dark blue or a green. When you put paint on top of this, it may push back the design. You could also do the stamping after the paint is dry. So if you did a base coat on everything, let it dry or use the heat tool, then you can come and do the stamping. And the stamping can be done with any color acrylic paint after the fact. So I'm going to use my Inktense blocks. Now the Inktense blocks, you get more of a watercolor look, and they are a little more faded. Although once you glue them down, they seem to bring back some of that vibrancy. But again, it's a different look. So I wouldn't not use them because you are getting a different look. The reason when I'm building a stash, I am doing 2 or 3 of the same, and that will give me the opportunity if I am doing a larger piece or I want multiple butterflies cut out of the same basic color pattern. I also look through what I have in my stash, and I'm true to the colors that I typically go to. I want a lot of greens and blues. I want, the corals, a lot of purples. That's what I typically use, so that's what I'm going to do. Here I'm just cleaning up, the remains on another coffee filter. It becomes a very faded one, but it's absolutely lovely later on. It's a bit of a messy job, but if you do a build a stash session, you clean up once and then it's done. Here I'm just using my Inktense blocks again. And I'm putting in, and if you add more water, and I'm going to come in with my finger and rub, that will blend these blocks. And I don't worry if there's little gaps and little white parts or wrinkles. That just adds more texture. This is a perfect time to play with colors and color combos. Remember, if it's wet, you want to stick to colors that are close to each other on the color wheel. Once it's dry, any color combo works. So if you have purple, then you can stencil on with yellow once the purple has dried. Later on, I do some coffee filters where I've let the base color dry and then I go on and stencil. Using this Crazy Wave stencil, I love those dots on there, but I'm doing it on wet, and you'll see that it bleeds out and gets kind of, it's not as distinct, but I like that look. So sometimes I may want to specifically choose it. Just let your mind go. Grab that stencil that you haven't used, put it on. Put several stencils. You'll get some interesting patterns and some wonderful colored papers. And maybe you'll discover a color combo or a stencil use that you absolutely love, and then you can use that and very deliberately make a background using that. That's happened to me. This is your time to play, explore, and learn and have fun. And, you know, at the end of it, you've added to your stash. Wouldn't this look lovely with stamp a butterfly on there, and you have those colors and you make your own focal point? So here I don't have enough water, and you have to work a little bit harder, but I kind of want to see that sponged on look. Just playing with something. Lots of ways to do it. When I use the paint for stenciling and I've used the makeup sponge, I spray it with water and then grab the coffee filter and get that paint out of the makeup sponge or cut and dry foam or the felt applicators, and then there's less waste. Just showing you different kind of stencils, how they look. They take on a whole new life when you're just kind of putting them on randomly. Now the bottom layer here is fairly dry. I wouldn't do something so finely detailed wet on wet, because it would just, you wouldn't get the effect of that at all. One thing that I didn't do in this video, you can use your lids and paint and make circles on some of this background paper, on this colored paper as well. Now all the stencils, after I've stenciled on and I've been applying paint and different things, I'm just throwing this into a tub with a dishwasher soap. Look at your stencils. You know, this is a Christmas tree, but it's also swirls, and it's going to look lovely on this coffee filter. Sorry. Here I tried out a color combo. Yeah, you know, I'm not exactly thrilled with it, but you know what? Once this becomes a background, it's going to look lovely. Here you can do the stenciling first and layer color later. And I'm going to dry that, and then I'm going to put some color on it. Odd color combination, but I do like it. Actually, I like it better when it blends. So wet on wet. But if you don't like something that you end up color combination, but just adds more layers. So here are some where I've done the backgrounds, I've put the color on, and they're dry. So now what I will do is I will get out different colors of paint. Here I've got the dark green, and I'm going to use some stamps and some mark making tools, and I'm going to put on a variety of the coffee filters that are dry. So I have one color, and I'm going to put it on, you know, I might put it on 5 coffee filters. So instead of pouring out paint for each separate one, you're pouring out paint once, doing all the ones you want with green, then you grab out another color. So I think I'm done with the green. I'm going to do some gold on this one. That's the one that I put the script on. It just needs a little bit more. I've got this tiny dot stencil. I'm just going to put a little bit on. If you're using multiple stencils, use sometimes stencils that have different sizes. The script was one size. The tiny dots is very smaller scale. I will show a close-up of the finished products at the end so you can see, because I know this is going fairly fast. So I'm back to putting some green on here. And I believe I'm using, this is the plastic embroidery mesh. Makes a perfect mark making tool. Now I'm getting out some Prussian blue. Some shelf liner. The shelf liners that I'm using, I will also throw those in the tub. And I'll put a link to the video where I show how I cleaned my stencils. It's a great, fast way of cleaning your stencils. Here's that one that I just mopped up the wet on the craft mat. And it actually ended up, because it's so muted, but once I've added the stamping on top, it just got beautiful. I love it. So I'm putting some green and some blue. So here again, all my different dried ones. And I grabbed a few that I already had in my stash that just had one color. Because quite often when you're using leftover paint, you're going to just have one color. Now that I got my sponges out, and I'm just adding Prussian blue onto a variety of these. This is the Snakeskin Stencil, which, you know, I'm not particularly fond of snakes, but this stencil adds lovely texture. So it's perfect on a collage sheet or colored paper. You know, after doing Prussian blue, I could grab out some pink or some black, white. You can add, you know, play with those colors. Go for contrast, go for colors that are close to each other on the color wheel when it's dry. Cosmic Swirl, lovely stencil. Looks so nice on this background. I remember often when you're collaging, you're ripping pieces of it. Love this section of this Crazy Waves stencil. I wish they had made a complete stencil of that. Here, I'm just using the entire stencil. No rhyme or reason. I like this. I might add some silver or some gold at some other point in time. I don't know if I do this in this video or not. But everything doesn't have to be completely done. So here I'm using up some of this green and blue paint, and this, in the end, this becomes one of my most favorite collage papers, colored papers of the whole group. And this is very similar to what I do when I have leftover paint when I'm doing a project. So even though you may build your stash, you want to have some coffee filters right at the ready while you're creating. Don't forget to stencil on with black and white or use your mark making tools. Here I'm just using good old bubble wrap, and it is kind of going on grungy. And I gotta say, those are the ones that I find make the most unique kind of backgrounds or collage elements. Those are the ones that really stand out. So I'm just putting some of the black paint on the craft mat. Here I'm using the plastic embroidery mesh to make marks. So again, you don't have to have, the brand name stencils and stamps. You can make some marks the other ways. And if you need examples of other things that you can use to make marks on your colored papers, watch some of my gel printing videos, because the same things that you use in gel printing, the mark making tools, you can use in this. So I'm adding white and black. I use a lot of blue, some of the dark greens, a lot of darker colors, but the white adds another layer. Here's my Coastal Escape stamp. Love this stamp. It's a very neutral friendly stamp, as is the script stamp. Here's the coffee filter that I created using leftover paint in this session. Thinking, okay, what color am I going to put on here? What stamp? This is a shelf liner. I love how this shelf liner looks when it's collaged on. An experiment. Put black first, then put color, stencil color on, or do it the other way. This coffee filter is really grunged up. It's crisp and it's crinkled, and it's going to make a lovely collage element. So here I'm using some silver and my script stamp. Really, the sky is the limit. Using silver and some shelf liner. This is the mini parasol stencil, and I'm putting blue on blue, but because when you do the coffee filters, the paint is wet, or the coffee filter is wet, it's very faded out, and so the stenciling, it's kind of tone on tone, and I really like that look. Harlequin stencil. And I'm not trying to stencil on perfectly. The quicker you go, the more random you are, the better your end papers are, I think. This is a mini Navajo stencil. So this one, I'm thinking, okay, it needs something else on here. This is the Circle of Jewels stencil, I believe. But I'll put the link in the description box below. And I'm using Prussian blue, and I'm going through, and I love that circle. Found another use of this stencil. I've been struggling with this stencil. I loved it when I saw it, but then I didn't know what to do with it, but I think I just found a good use. If you have a creative friend, have them bring a few of their stencils and stamps. You bring yours and share them. This is the perfect time to do it. Then you have more stamps and stencils than you thought because it's in your colored papers. This one is Stitched Art, I think. I meant to order the big one, but the little one is what I got, but this is a perfect use of it. Has lots of little texture marks in there.
So as promised, I'm going to do a flip through of the coffee filters that I have in the iCards, which are in the top right hand corner. If you click on that, I'm going to link videos where I've used coffee filters in my creations. And there will also be some, always at the end of the video, I link to related videos in there, either something that's the same color scheme, something that uses the same technique, or it's the same theme. So before we flip through these, I do have still some ones that just basically have base color on them. And these I can either file in my stash or just keep close on hand with the plain white ones. And when I have leftover paint or a different stencil out, I can add some layers to this. But it's also good to have some basic base coated ones in each color, because you may decide, oh, I want something corally, but I want it with blue because of something you're doing in a certain project. And then you don't have to start from step one. Remember, that's the goal of building your stash, is having things at hand. So, oops, I took away some of the finished ones here. Okay, so at the end I will also put some still pictures of a few of these, of my favorite ones, but you can see the randomness of it. So I will sort these out and by color, by basic, the main color. So this would go into blue, and I put this into my filing system, and I'll put a link to both videos. There's the big blue bin video, which is how I store all my embellishments and everything and papers. But I also have another system for littler pieces of colored papers. And if you can't find the link, if you go to my playlist, organization or studio, you'll be able to find that. So here we have an example. This is when you stencil when it's wet, and this is when it's dry. You get more precise. So two different looks. I did wet the base, the coffee filter when I was doing the stenciling. The base color is permanent now because it's already dried, but it does make it easier to put the paint on. This one had the same stencil, and I just bumped it and I put two different colors, and so now you have kind of an all-over design. Some stamping after the fact. Loving this one. Just the colors. So this would be something I may want to recreate again. Those colors, that pattern. Links to all the stencils and stamps that I used. I'm going to put those in the description box below, if I can find an Amazon link for them. People inevitably ask, and I just find it easier to do that. However, some of them aren't. You can't get them through Amazon. But that way you'll have the name and you'll be able to find it. This one doesn't look quite done yet. Again, stenciling while wet, stenciling while dry. Please give this a try. Build up the colored papers in your stash. You will absolutely love working with the coffee filters as collage items in your works. I promise you that. The paper is amazing to work with. Once you create and build your stash, please take a picture of a few of your favorites and share it in my Facebook group, Mixed Media Creations. Until the next video, keep crafting.